The Too Big to Fail was written by Andrew Ross Sorkin. It explores the events surrounding the 2008 global financial crisis, focusing on the collapse of major financial institutions and the decisions made by key players in the government and finance world to prevent the complete collapse of the economy. The book provides an in-depth look at the high-stakes world of banking, finance, and politics, and how a series of events led to one of the most severe economic crises in history. The story begins in the lead-up to the crisis, during a time when large financial institutions were enjoying a period of growth and success. However, things started to unravel when the housing market in the United States began to crash, leading to huge losses for banks and investors. The problem started with risky investments in subprime mortgages, which were loans given to people with poor credit histories. These risky loans were bundled together and sold to investors worldwide as if they were safe. But when the housing bubble burst, it caused massive losses that spread across the global financial system. As the financial crisis worsened, some of the biggest banks and investment firms in the world were on the brink of collapse. Lehman Brothers, a giant investment bank, was the first to fail. Its bankruptcy in September 2008 sent shockwaves through the entire financial system, triggering panic in markets around the world. The U.S. government and the Federal Reserve quickly realized that the failure of Lehman Brothers could lead to even more bank failures, creating a financial meltdown that could lead to a global depression. In the wake of Lehman Brothers' collapse, the U.S. government, led by Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson and Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke, scrambled to find a solution. They realized that some banks were simply too big to fail, meaning that if they were allowed to collapse, it would have catastrophic consequences for the entire economy. Among these institutions was American International Group, AIG, a massive insurance company that had made risky bets on mortgage-backed securities. If AIG were to fail, it would cause even more damage to the global financial system. In a dramatic move, the government stepped in with an $85 billion bailout to prevent AIG from collapsing. But the crisis did not end with the AIG bailout. Other major financial institutions, including Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, and Citigroup, were facing serious financial trouble. The government and the Federal Reserve worked together to arrange a series of emergency measures to prevent more banks from collapsing. This included the controversial decision to provide bailout funds to banks in exchange for partial ownership, which was designed to stabilize the financial system. As the government worked to stop the bleeding, it faced intense political pressure. Many Americans were angry that taxpayer money was being used to bail out big banks and financial institutions, especially when ordinary people were losing their homes and jobs. There was a growing sense of injustice, and critics argued that the government was rescuing the very institutions that had caused the crisis in the first place. Despite the growing public backlash, the government and the Federal Reserve believed that these measures were necessary to prevent a total collapse of the financial system. Without government intervention, they feared that the world's largest banks would fail, credit markets would freeze up, and the global economy would go into freefall. The story focuses on the behind-the-scenes decisions made by key leaders, such as Paulson, Bernanke, and others, who had to make life-or-death choices for the financial system. One of the key themes in the book is the idea of too big to fail. Sorkin explores how the size and interconnectedness of major financial institutions made it impossible for them to fail without causing widespread damage to the economy. This created a moral and ethical dilemma. Should the government step in to save these institutions, even though they were largely responsible for the crisis? Or should they let them fail, even if it meant risking a global depression? In addition to the story of the financial institutions and the government's response, Too Big to Fail also highlights the personalities and tensions among the key players involved. Sorkin takes readers inside the high-pressure meetings where decisions were made in real time. The book shows how Paulson, Bernanke, and others struggled to balance the demands of Wall Street with the needs of Main Street, and how they navigated the complexities of the financial crisis. Wall Street refers to the financial world, particularly the large banks and investment firms in New York. It represents high finance with powerful institutions that influence the economy. Main Street, in contrast, refers to the everyday economy, affecting regular people through small businesses, jobs, and consumer spending. The term reflects the interests of ordinary citizens who often face hardships during economic downturns, unlike the wealthier, corporate world of Wall Street. The book goes on to describe the impact of the crisis on the global economy. As banks teetered on the edge of collapse, the stock market plunged, and the financial sector ground to a halt. The effects of the crisis were felt around the world, with millions of people losing their jobs, homes, and savings. In the U.S., unemployment soared, and businesses faced unprecedented challenges. The ripple effects were felt across the globe as the crisis spread to other countries and economies. As the months passed, the U.S. government took more aggressive steps to stabilize the financial system. The Troubled Asset Relief Program, TARP, was introduced, which authorized the government to buy toxic assets from banks in order to restore confidence in the financial system. The Federal Reserve also lowered interest rates to encourage borrowing and spending, and it took extraordinary steps to inject liquidity into the financial markets. While the immediate crisis was eventually stabilized, the book also looks at the long-term consequences of the decisions made during the financial crisis. Sorkin reflects on the impact of the bailout programs and the public anger that followed. The crisis led to a major debate about the role of government in the economy and the risks of allowing large financial institutions to become too big to fail. In the end, the book paints a vivid picture of the chaos and uncertainty that defined the 2008 financial crisis. It highlights the difficult decisions made by government officials and financial leaders as they tried to prevent a global economic disaster. Sorkin's thorough research and interviews with key players provide readers with a detailed and gripping account of one of the most significant events in modern economic history. The Too Big to Fail is not just a story of the financial collapse, but also an exploration of the systems and people that made it possible. It raises important questions about the risks of unchecked financial power, the responsibilities of government and business leaders, and the consequences of the growing size and influence of global financial institutions. By the end of the book, readers are left with a better understanding of how the financial system works, the dangers of financial instability, and the difficult choices that leaders must make in times of crisis. Sorkin's detailed and accessible narrative makes the complex world of finance understandable for a wide audience, and Too Big to Fail remains an essential work for anyone looking to understand the events that shaped the global financial crisis and the aftermath that followed. It serves as a cautionary tale about the risks of financial excess and the consequences of allowing powerful institutions to become too big to fail.